I love to outline. I have an outline for this interview. You know, I really like going into any meeting knowing why I'm in that meeting. And so I always have an outline for the episode, and the outline is just sort of a list of, I took 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I sat down and I thought about the mechanic and I wrote down some basic thoughts that I had, and then we can take those and sort of expand on them as we go.
Welcome to Tabletop Talk, a unique podcast where I delve into the minds of creatives in the tabletop gaming space. I'm here to uncover their creative process and inspirations, driven by my passion for understanding who they are and why they create. Enjoy this interview with Sam Dunnewold, the podcaster behind Dice Exploder. We talk about how he has a lifelong history of being the one that brings people together to a table, where the idea of the Dice Exploder podcast came from, and the bizarre but exciting game he created with Jason Morningstar that plays with time and Jesse James. Okay, sit back, relax, roll another die, and your six just exploded, and enjoy my time with Sam.
Hey, this is Ross Bryant, and when I'm not playing characters who are being driven mad by chthonic deities that dwell in the dark abyssal gulfs between the stars, I'm listening to Tabletop Talk.
Howdy friends, Craig here. My guest today is Sam Dunnewold. Sam is an award-winning filmmaker, podcaster, and game designer behind games like Duskfall Breathes, Space Train Space Heist, and his most recent release, Northfield, co-designed with friend of the show, Jason Morningstar. Sam won a Golden Cobra once, was a judge for the 2022 The Awards, and is probably best known in the RPG world as the host of one of my favorite pods, the Dice Exploder, a TTRPG design podcast that breaks down one mechanic an episode. Oh, by the way, Sam has no colon. Sam, welcome to the third floor.
Thank you so much for having me. This is one of my favorite pods, so I am really excited to be here on the show.
I appreciate that, Sam. And what's funny is, so just so the audience knows, Sam has no colon is in your intro that I got from you. I don't want people to think like, what the hell is Craig talking about?
Sometimes people hear that and they're like, is there like a punctuation? Are they reading out the typo of the punctuation? What's going on here?
So Sam and I caught up a little bit before we came on mic, and Sam immediately said to you, Craig, we have something in common. I said, what is that? He goes, we both have Crohn's disease, which suddenly made the Sam has no colon for me make total sense. And I'll tell you, and I think that maybe some of you listening can appreciate this. When you have a certain incurable or long-term condition, like something like Crohn's disease, but there's a lot of other ones, especially autoimmune diseases, it is really nice to connect and find somebody else who can understand things. Because I don't know about you, Sam, even my wife struggles, right? Understanding, what it is, and nor could she, right? Because she doesn't have it. So I appreciated our conversation before we got started.
Absolutely. Honestly, like, we're going to come back to this topic, as so much of what I have ended up making art about in my career has been that feeling of like wanting connection about and understanding about that and other things in life.
You, sir, are on the right podcast. So as a listener of the show, you know what's coming, which is at one point you knew nothing about tabletop role playing and it was put in front of you for the first time. Can we go back there, Sam?
Yeah. So this was, I believe, the third grade, might have been the fifth grade. One of third and fifth grade was Magic the Gathering, which also has been an enormous part of my life. But the other one, let's call it fifth grade, was Dungeons and Dragons. My dad had played like 4 sessions of D&D in the 80s in grad school.
Yeah.
And he, I think, had really loved it and never been able to find anyone who would play it with him. So he had to, create some kids that would play it with him instead. So finally, when I was old enough, we'd been reading like Lord of the Rings books together, Earthsea books, all the classic fantasy stuff. And he explained Dungeons and Dragons to me. And I was like, obviously, I want to play that. And the first thing that happened actually was I immediately went and told all my friends about it. Ever since I was a small kid, I was an organizer of just grabbing friends and putting together projects and activities and stuff. And so I told all my friends, and I grabbed my best friend who lived a couple doors down, and he was really excited about the idea because we played a lot of video games together, the classic RPGs and stuff. And I pulled him over and he was like, well, can we just like play right now? And I was like, yeah, why not? And we didn't have the books yet. Like, I didn't understand. I'd been like playing make believe up to this point, right? Like, my dad had this. We'd done this thing of sitting down and like getting a bedtime story from him, where he was just making up a story every night that was sort of like a proto RPG kind of thing already. So I sat down with my friend and I was like, yeah, let's just do it. And so we wandered around the yard and looked for treasure chests, and we're very bored. It was like, this sucks. Like, what are we doing? Like, he almost backed out of wanting to actually come and then play D&D. And of
your
course,
career as a GM starts.
Yeah, exactly. It started on a very bad foot. But, I convinced him to come back. I got my other best friend to come in. The three of us sat down with my dad. And of course, when an adult is running the show, things go a little bit better. And it was right away. We loved it. We're all, the other thing I was coming out of was Myst. I played Myst with my dad.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And we were all coming out of those kinds of point and click puzzle games, among other things. And I think like the legend is that we sat down to play for the first time. And my dad was like, okay, the three of you are friends. You wake up in an inn. What do you want to do? And we were like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, you can, I don't know, do whatever you want. What do you want to do? And we're like, can we go to the bathroom? And he's like, yeah, you can go down the hall to the bathroom. And so someone's like, are there monsters? And he's like, I don't know. It's the bathroom. And he's like, are there toilet monsters? We got to check the toilet monsters. We got to check for toilet monsters. And we like spent 10 minutes checking for monsters in the toilet, and then got started on, the whatever prearranged quest that he had ready for us. And that kicked off this combination of friend hangout with fifth graders and like, I'm doing massive scare quotes here, playing Dungeons and Dragons with my dad, who did not have time to read any of the books. He truly was doing the same thing I was doing in the yard with the treasure chest, of just like making it up as he went. But, he was an adult, so he was better at it. And we had a lot of fun. So I did that for years.
When did you realize, or how old were you, or where in this path did you realize, oh, wait, there are books. There is a structure. There's a framework to work from. When did you first come across that?
Oh, well, before my dad, like, let me be clear. My dad got the books. He just didn't read them. I read the heck out of them. I read those books so many times. And this was second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And then just a couple of years later, it felt like forever at the time, but it was probably only like 18 months later, third edition came out. And I read those books over and over and over. I still got one of them on my shelf over here. Damn. That was what I laid in bed awake doing, and constantly trying to get my friends to play with me. Yeah.
At what point did you play with your dad not at the table, where you actually played a real not a real session, but you know what I mean by that, right?
Yeah,
when you kind of broke away from dad, kind of brought the game structure into play.
Really quickly, honestly.
Okay.
I think I was in sixth grade when it started coming together, or 1 year after we'd really gotten started playing with him. And, it was still tied into my dad of like, oh, I had all these ideas about it being set in the same world and like doing all these other things. But my dad wasn't around, and it was me and my friends. I really roped in every single person from my class that I could manage to do it. This is a story I haven't told before. So I got this girl to come play with us, a couple of girls to come play with us. And one of them stuck and the other one didn't. And after a year, I was inviting her to come to a session, and she was like, I don't want to play these games anymore. And I was like brokenhearted by this, because I thought she was very cool and she was my friend, and I wanted to play this amazing hobby with her. And I found out, must have been 6 years later or something, like at the end of high school, she was like, yeah, I loved playing the games, but all the other girls were making fun of me, so I had to stop.
Oh,
and it was really heartbreaking.
That is heartbreaking.
But yeah, I mean, that was D&D, and my initial experiences with D&D were all wrapped up in that kind of social interaction when you're in middle school and high school.
So you are the gravity well of role playing in this group of friends, right? You're the organizer. You're bringing people in. Is there anybody, so we hear your story, your dad was the person who introduced you to the hobby. Is there anybody out here in the world from that group that would tell me, so I had this friend named Sam and he wanted to play D&D. Is there any of these people that you still know actually caught the bug and the hobby continued for them afterwards?
I know a lot of those people really enjoyed their time. I think the people I was very initially playing with, most of them I've grown apart from, so I can't speak to it directly. One of them remains one of my best friends, and he just hasn't had time in his life. Every couple of years, he emails me and is like, we should play D&D again. And I'm like, absolutely, but I'm busy, so you have to organize it. And then it doesn't happen. So there was a lot of that. And then I think once I got to college and beyond, there are a lot more people sort of in my adult life. I think I developed this skill of how to gently introduce people to RPGs who might otherwise be skeptical of them.
And so now you got to reveal that to us. What is your technique, Sensei?
I think Dungeons and Dragons is a bad game to start most people on. Actually, there's an episode of Dice Exploder that's coming out soon where I had this conversation with a friend where he said he thinks D&D is a great introduction to the hobby still because there's all this, I think the theoretical term is lonely fun that you can do with D&D of sitting by yourself. And it's the fun you can have alone between sessions, planning your character.
Or that's the pull of magic, right? That's the beauty of magic is how much fun you have when you're not playing.
Yeah, and just reading the books, all those late nights I was up reading the Manual of the Planes for the 10th time, like that kind of, there's so much of that in D&D that allows you to stay engaged. But that's only a good introduction if what the person wants in their life is an all-consuming hobby, right? And I completely agree that if you're trying to hook people into an all-consuming hobby, D&D actually is kind of a good starter game for that reason. But most people don't want that. Most people this was another thing that happened to me recently. Some local friends just started having a monthly board game night. And I was like, I love board games. Of course, I'm so excited. Maybe I'll be able to bring For the Queen eventually. We'll have a lot of fun. And I showed up with my partner to this board game night and it's like 7:30. We take an hour, we have dinner, we chat, we play half an hour of The Mind as a group of 9 people when the game is designed for 4. And it's great with 9 and also it's very casual. Then we played the Monopoly card game for 15 minutes and then everyone had to go because it's 9:15. And that was a board game night. Less than half the time were we playing board games. And I think of a board game night. I think most people who are in this hobby deep enough to be listening to this podcast, think of a board game night as, okay, we're going to show up at 6 and we're going to play 4 different 90-minute games and go home at midnight.
Yep.
And that's just, I just, my mind, I went home on the one hand, kind of disappointed that I had to put up with the Monopoly card game, which some people really do, but everyone else there loved this game. I went home and talked to Jason Morningstar about it, and he was like, "That's a great game." And I was like, "No, I want the hard
lost
stuff."
That bet, really? Oh God, that's really funny.
To be fair, the Monopoly card game is really different from Monopoly. It only takes 10 minutes to play, and even if it's not for me, a 10-minute game experience is a wonderful kind of game experience to have, right? But the other part of me that wasn't disappointed was oh, right. This is how people experience board games. You go have dinner, you hang out with people, you chill for half an hour, you play Codenames twice, and then you go home. And that's the evening. And why aren't role-playing games more like that? Why aren't there more role-playing games that slot into that space in our lives? And one reason is because the hobby doesn't have that tradition built into it. And one reason is that it's hard to make short games. I think the kinds of role-playing games that we think of, or that most of us really love playing, just are longer, especially campaign length stuff. You can't play Blades in the Dark. You can't play Blades in the Dark in 90 minutes and have a really satisfying experience unless you're really hacking it to heck. So I think, though, that if the thing that you want to do is to introduce someone to the hobby who is potentially really interesting. I'm a screenwriter. I have a lot of screenwriter friends. I think a lot of those people are really interested in story games, potentially. But also, yeah, D&D is a hard sell for them because they don't have 4 hours every week. And just inviting those people over, have dinner a little bit, pull out For the Queen is my go-to for a reason, because it's so good, and it's one of the only games that really does fit into this slot. Fiasco also, I think if you're playing with people, like a small number of people who maybe already have some storytelling skills, you can play Fiasco in 90 minutes, right? You can play it in one evening. But you just, especially that new card version.
It's so good.
So you pull out one of those, you play it once, you say, hey, what did you enjoy that? And if they didn't, that's it. They don't like the hobby, that's fine. But if they did, then you say, okay, cool. I mean, if you wanted to come back and do this again sometime and maybe like specifically do this, then, maybe we play a 2.5 hour long one shot of the Warren or something that's a little bit bigger, and you build off of that until eventually you have a new Blades in the Dark campaign. And that has been my strategy, and it has worked very well for me.
For a person who has such a passionate love of this hobby, I never give it credit, not the credit it's due. And I had a similar experience. So through my wife and her work, we ended up having another couple friend. One of those rare instances where she likes both of them, I like both of them, they both like both of us, right? That's, as an adult, that just doesn't happen every day.
Yeah.
And one time we're coming over for dinner. It's the 5th or 6th time we've had dinner together. And for the fuck of it, I brought a board game. I still don't remember what it was. It was probably a card game, right? But it was like one step up from Catan, right? Because I knew they were both really smart people. And I just thought, what the hell? I'll try this. We play the card game, love it. That turns into a board game tradition. So now I've introduced 2 new people to board games. They now own well over 100 different board games because they just fell in love with it. So then one time I'm like, I think I'm going to bring Fiasco.
Yeah. And
the whole time I'm like, I'm going to put it in the bag. It probably won't come out. This is a terrible idea. They're going to hate it. They're going to look at me like I'm a strange human being. So get going. And 15 minutes in, they light up. And that's happened to me a few times where I've brought something like Fiasco or For the Queen, for sure telling myself the whole time, this is a terrible idea. These people are not going to, and every time it lands, every time it's a hit. And I think I forget how easy play can be.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, to sort of continue on the story of my RPG history. Like I got to college, and in the middle of college was introduced to Fiasco by a friend, and was just immediately like, oh, role-playing games can be this. Like, I actually prefer Coen Brothers movies to the Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings too, but like, give me that. I want to just get into trouble and have my little protagonist person be buried alive. Like, I want to like get in the crap, And I started playing Fiasco with everyone. I would just grab every single one of my friends and be like, come on, just tonight we're in the dorms. Just come over, just play this. Come on, just have a couple of drinks, sit down and play Fiasco. And it was a little bit of a hard sell, but you're working with you're working with your close friends. It's college. People are up for whatever on a weeknight. The couple of beers helped, and everyone loved it.
It's amazing.
I had no one who didn't enjoy it, and I really, really played just so much Fiasco because it fits so well into exactly that spot that we have both been talking about here of like, someone can be new to the hobby and you can be done in one evening.
We find out, you start with D&D like many of us do. You come across Fiasco, it blows your mind a little bit, makes you realize, wow, like there's a lot more to this. What was the next game? What was the next game that kind of blew your mind?
Well, so we skipped over a used and heavily highlighted copy of Shadowrun 2nd Edition that my dad bought me at the age of 12 and I was way too young for, but we'll kind of leave that there. And then we're also going to touch very briefly on one. At my college, there was a like midterm break RPG long weekend event that would have like a little mini con for people. And there was one GM who had graduated a few years prior who would come back and run games. And he would run them in his own custom bespoke system they were all horror games, and he would write these handwritten character letters to you ahead of time that were like, this is your deal, this is who you are and what you want and what secrets you're keeping from everyone else. And then he'd just conduct a 3-hour long horror movie that barely engaged with any rules. He just had a setup and everyone had their secrets. And by the end of it, everyone was backstabbing each other. And those games were some of the best I've ever played to this day. And part of that's nostalgia, but also, wow, were those good. And that was really contemporary with Fiasco. And I think if I had the rules for what he was doing written down, that would have been the thing that I really started trying to do everywhere else. But I couldn't carry that forward because it just all lived in his head. And so the next thing I really found was Fate. Fate was coming out right around the time I was graduating college, at least the updated edition of it. Maybe they were doing, I don't know. It's 2012. That's when I graduated college. That's how old I am. But Fate to me was, I can go back and play the D&D stories that I'm kind of missing now, but I can do it without all this baggage. I can keep all the wonderful accoutrement of D&D, of pick yourself a race, pick yourself a class. Like, I really think the pick lists of race and class in D&D are so much of what makes that game amazing and lovable and time honored. Of you pick a race, you pick a class, you see how they mash together in unexpected ways, and then you have like a stereotype to push back against, and you got to keep all of that and then bring it to Fate, where you didn't have to worry about 300 pages of spells and magic items. You could just write down cursed sword as an aspect and keep moving. And that was a big deal for me for a few years. And then I got bored of Fate because I couldn't actually figure out how to make it work the way I wanted it to.
Why is that?
I think it was, I'm a perfectionist. Mm-hmm. And I think writing aspects is hard even when you're not a perfectionist.
I agree.
And then really hard when you're a perfectionist. And
Fate asks more of the table than people, I think, are willing to acknowledge.
Yes, I agree. And I also think Fate, its genericness is in some ways helpful because it's a canvas that you can paint onto, but in some ways unhelpful because it's a canvas you have to paint onto. That it's, Fate can't do every kind of story well because it's very much heroes succeeding, high, action, fun, pulp stuff. Yep. But any genre. And so I became more and more of an adult. The players I was playing with were more casual, which wasn't a problem, but did mean that it felt less worth my time to put in the amount of energy into Fate that Fate really required of me. And so around then I moved and sort of had a new group, and the new and 5th edition was also becoming very big. And the campaign settings for 5th edition were coming out. Yep. And I was like, oh, sweet. I don't have to do any inventing anymore. I can just read the campaign setting and run that. And I went back to 5th edition. And that's where I sat for a while. So,
Sam, I know this because of your podcast. What I don't know is, when did you, I understand when you engaged the hobby and how the hobby got its hooks into you. When did mechanics become so goddamn important to you?
Well, I mean, mechanics, we're going to do a whole segment on Dice Exploder, is my understanding, but we're going to start it right here because, mechanics aren't actually the thing to me. Mechanics aren't particularly, obviously I'm interested in
so
mechanics.
So let's make a podcast about it.
They're not the thing to me. The thing with Dice Exploder for me was that mechanics are not the most important thing to me. The thing about conversations in the role-playing game design community that I'm a part of is that most of them are very high level and abstract. Mm-hmm. And that's not true across the board. I'm less involved in the OSR, NSR, elf game kind of scene. And there's a lot of very specific blogging over there about, here, try this mechanic kind of thing. But in the like story game side of the world that I'm in the D&D world, I think there's theory conversations are about like high level taxonomies. And I just have never found that stuff helpful. I think it's interesting as sort of a novelty. I think it is fun to shoot the shit. I think it's I love that people love that. But I also in college had a philosophy major roommate who loved talking about that kind of stuff. And it just drove me up the wall. You know, he would be saying stuff like, how do we know that gravity's real? And I would be like, I understand what you are actually asking, like what you're trying to get at. You want to talk about epistemology and like I don't know how to tell you that like I'm standing on the ground right now. And if I tip your soda over, like it's going to spill all over the floor. Like I'm so much more interested in how do we talk about the stuff that's actually happening at the table? And how do we talk about the stuff that I'm actually doing when I'm designing a game?
Yeah.
And I just love a specific example, and talking about a specific movie was like how I learned to direct in college as a filmmaker. You know, you sit down, you watch Mulholland Drive with your friend at like 10 a.m. or at 10 p.m. And then like the next day you just get lunch and dinner and you're just talking about Mulholland Drive all day and the essays that you were exchanging about it last night and the specific moments that David Lynch is like creating in that movie.
Yep.
And I just didn't see anyone doing that in the RPG kind of theory discussion world. And I'm sure those people were out there and just not in my space. But, you know, Sidney Icarus was doing the hard move for a little bit, and the hard move was co-created by someone else whose name I've forgotten, who was before that. And I loved that show. And I just kept waiting for my phone to refresh one day and for a new episode of the hard move to be created, because I wanted those specific example conversations again. And eventually I realized they were not coming. And if I wanted those conversations to happen, I was going to have to make them happen myself.
So again, this helps a lot, but I don't know if we've answered the question, right? But
Sure.
Which is, there's all kinds of specifics we could have dove into, right? So Why did you choose mechanics?
Well, let's think about some of the other kinds of specifics. So another obvious answer is a specific game. Mm-hmm. And I think one game is too much to really cover to get as detailed as I want to get on an hour-long podcast episode. You know, RTFM is another podcast that I really love. Max and Aaron on that show, I think, do a great job. They cover one episode a day, or one book per episode. There's, I believe, the RPG Book Club is another one that has come out recently, maybe the TTRPG Book Club, also doing a great job. But they just, again, couldn't get
as deep
even
as you
that
wanted.
level wasn't as specific as I wanted to get. And you know, there are other specific things we could talk about. Like we could go really deep on one creator's process. Mm-hmm. A lot of people like you were already doing that. I didn't feel like I needed to add more to that kind of angle. We could go really deep on one moment of play. Like imagine we record a session of play and then we pick out a 5-minute recording of it. And then we pick apart what decision was every player and GM making in that 5 minutes. And that's a show that I would love to make. I do want to make that show. And also that's a lot harder to make, a lot more logistics involved in that than just having on a designer and talking about one.
You're kind of blowing my mind, because that has been something that has been in the back of my head for a very long time. And my version of that, which is very similar to what you just said, is like a DVD commentary.
Yeah.
Right. Where we do 5-10 minutes of play. And then the people who are at the table have a conversation of what was happening here. What drove you this way? GM, why did you choose A over B? You know, and I think it'd be amazing, but I haven't done it for the exact reason you just said. Like logistically, it's a bit of a PETA.
I will also say I have recorded that show and I'm in the process of editing it. And
that makes me happy.
A lot more work than I have time for at the moment. But at some point, the Dice Exploder RTFM crossover of everyone's dreams is going to come and be that exciting show. And I'm excited about how it's going to turn out.
From the very beginning, was it always, did Dice Exploder from the beginning, I'm going to pick a mechanic, I'm going to dig into it. If I go to episode 1 and I go to last week's episode,
Yeah.
What first off, what didn't change, right? So when I listened to your first 3 episodes and your the three latest episodes, what am I going to hear that hasn't changed over all of these episodes?
The basic format is really, really similar. I have on a co-host. Some people would call them a guest, but I like co-host better. I usually let them pick the mechanic that they're going to bring, because I also really like it when people are really excited, and when they are bringing the mechanic, they tend to be really excited. And then we just talk the heck out of it. We just go through. I love to outline. I have an outline for this interview. You know, I really like going into any meeting knowing why I'm in that meeting. And so I always have an outline for the episode, and the outline is just sort of a list of, I took 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I sat down and I thought about the mechanic and I wrote down some basic thoughts that I had. And then we can take those and sort of expand on them as we go. And I think you can see that in the format of the show in a way that hasn't changed from first to most recent episode of, we talk for 10 minutes about a thing, and then that naturally transitions into another thing. And maybe we get into like quantum physics or the meaning of love, real things that have happened on the show. But then we sort of wrap up that nugget of conversation and move on to the next one. And that doesn't perfectly match whatever my outline was, but that form is coming out of that outline, I think. And that remains really true.
Now, we obviously would hear a lot of changes, right, as you developed as a broadcaster. When do you remember when you found your voice, when you finally got your groove, knew what the podcast was going to be and what it was going to sound like? How soon in your journey did that happen?
So the answer to this question is that I have been listening to podcasts for longer than they've been called podcasts. And I have been professionally making other podcasts for a good period of time there. I got started at The Onion making podcasts, which was a great time. I continued making a lot of fiction podcasts after that. I spent 6 months producing a variety of comedy, like talk show podcasts between people. And through all of that, I was developing the voice of Sam Dunnewold by living my life and by writing my screenplays and by playing RPGs and all of that jazz. And I was also developing a lot of opinions about how I thought a sustainable podcast should be made, both at the really professional level where you have a huge budget, and at the really hobbyist level where I am at with Dice Exploder. And what that show should look like. And when I started recording Dice Exploder, I was not sure that my ideas were going to be correct for me, but I was confident. And I recorded one episode and I was like, I was right about everything. Perfect. Cool. We did it. So I really feel like I was forging my voice this whole time, in the lead up to Dice Exploder. And then one of the things that I'm really proud of about the show is I think it really did emerge fully formed. And that's not, that's when I hit play on, I want to do this project, but I'd been thinking for a decade about what would my podcast look like. I'd been doing all of that voice generation for a long time. And I'm in some ways both lucky and talented and hardworking to have gotten to the point where it did click right away for me.
It sounds to me, Sam, that you're a little bit like me. The way my mind works is I see something I want to do, right? And I'm going to use an example that happened a while back with my wife. Is my wife wanted a new kitchen table. And I went out and started looking at kitchen tables. I'm like, holy shit, a good kitchen table is an expensive thing. And my father's a carpenter, and I was just started looking at him. I'm like, I think I could make one, but I had never built that before. And a year goes by. My wife's like, are you going to make? I'm like, I'm going to make the table. And what was hard for me to articulate to her is I had already built that table hundreds of times in my head, had gone through and go, well, how am I going to do this? And then I go down a rabbit hole of researching how you do that type of a joint, right? And then how you solve this problem. So then when I finally built the table, I just built the goddamn thing.
Yeah.
And it looks like from the outside, for my wife, she's like, you've never done that before. And I'm like, technically you're right. But believe it or not, honey, this is the 200th table I've made.
So I would say that 100% describes me, but is missing a layer. And for me, the layer that it's missing is anxiety and denial. So I will spend a decade being like, yeah, I kind of think I'd be good at podcasting and I would like to make a podcast, but I'm going to take 10 years being like, yeah, I don't want to be just another guy with a podcast. Like, is it really worth my time?
White guy with a podcast.
Exactly. Like, you can't make I'm not, it's a crowded market. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, we just don't, no one's going to listen to this. Why would I ever do this? And then finally, after all that time, I'll like come out and like have Dice Exploder and it'll be amazing. Like, and it's the same thing to me in like any medium. Like I took, last year I took a clown class, which was an amazing time. And it was, like a 21-week long clown class every week. I really got into it. I had a great time. And by the end, like, I was pretty good at that. And part of the reason I was doing that is because I like missed performance in my life. I'd done a little bit of acting in high school and college, but then I'd kind of defined myself as a writer and a director instead, and a game designer eventually, and moved into that. And the whole time there were all these other people in the, most people, I live in Los Angeles, they're taking a clown class. These are stand-up comedians and actors, right?
Right.
And honestly, also teachers and computer programmers and musicians, but a lot of actors and stand-up comedians. And several such people in the class were like, you would be so good at stand-up. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. That's like a whole thing. I spent months, and it's been years. I tried out for the like stand-up like club in college and like didn't get in. Who knows why they weren't just letting everyone in? That seems ridiculous in retrospect. But like, I'd been like, I don't want to do stand-up. Who wants to go do open mics and like hang out with a bunch of like white guys doing like very jokes with a lot of isms to them, right? For the entire building your career and like getting good, like getting through that Ira Glass quote about I have taste, but I don't have talent yet. And that gap. I don't want to like be miserable in the trenches, like doing that. I'm just never going to do stand up. I'll write it out of my life. That's fine. But then I went and did stand up and I was great at it and I loved it. I was 10 years, 15 years of being like, I'm never going to do this thing. I would never do that. And then finally I like burst out of it and was like, oh, I love this. I want to do it all the time.
So what's the push then, Sam? So you're in your head for, 6 months, a year, a decade, right? And just going over, talking yourself into it, out of it. And it's just twirling around. And then something pushes you and you just freaking do it. You record the first episode, you get up on stage and tell jokes. What is it, the same push every time?
Part of it is, I think, my brain finally admitting that I do feel like I would be good enough at this thing that I wouldn't be a horrible failure. But that's not it, because I'm also like, I'm really busy. I do so many things, and I'm trying to make a career out of being a screenwriter, which you can devote as much time to as you want to in your life. It can be incredibly all consuming. And on top of that, I'm making Dice Exploder, right?
Yep.
And with something like Dice Exploder, I think it was just the right idea. I finally, I'd wanted to make a podcast forever, and finally the right idea came to my head. I felt like I had permission to pick up the hard move format and go do the thing. And that's finally what clicked for it. So I think it's a combination of those two things. Oh, and the other thing that might happen in some cases is social pressure. Like the reason I finally went and did stand up was because I had people to go do it with, to make it a social activity.
Okay.
And so it's some combination of I finally feel like I'm good enough at it, or I finally feel like I have an idea that is exciting enough to me that I want to get good enough to execute on the idea, and I have community, so I'm not going to be alone.
You said something a little bit earlier I want to go back to, Sam, which is you mentioned I had a clear sense in my head what were keystones to a good podcast. What were those things in your head?
Yeah. So I want to start by saying a good podcast is like whatever anyone enjoys listening to, right?
Yeah.
And like we know that, but I just like saying it. And I think there are kind of two kinds of podcasts. There is a few hosts hanging out, and there is heavily produced.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe interview is sort of a bridge between those two things, depending on the interview show.
Yep.
But I was thinking about those buckets, and I knew that I never wanted to make a show that was just me and someone else hanging out, or at least I didn't want to start with that, because I didn't want to be another white guy with a podcast. Like, it just didn't feel like it was something that was needed of me. And so, yeah, I think one of the things that makes a show like that function is the parasocial relationship that you kind of develop with the hosts. Like, that's what makes those sort of long, meandering episodes fun, is you just get to hang out with these people. And if I wasn't going to have that, then I knew I needed to lean into production value. Like, that's what I think you should do, or what anyone should do, if you're not going to kind of lean into the we're just all hanging out here kind of format. And luckily for me, like, not only have I been making podcasts forever, but I've been editing video and audio since I was in the 6th grade. Like, as long as I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons, basically.
Yeah.
And I love editing. I love editing.
Why?
Editing.
What do you love about it?
I love controlling pace. I like pacing and timing. I think it is really fun to, that like kind of video that you'll watch where it'll be like something funny will happen and it'll cut off like right at the funny thing. It'll be like set up, like bucket of water falls off the top of the door and you get 3 frames of someone going, ah, and like then the video's over and that's it. I love that. That's just such catnip to me of getting a joke out of that delivery, that pacing. And I also think, like I was obsessed with this short film that I made where I like was able to take a pause in an actor's line and like really extend it out through editing to like make it more of a dramatic pause. I love doing that.
It sounds like controlling time.
Yeah, maybe it is just that, like, I wish I could control mortality and like, I don't think that it's that. I think it's more about making people laugh for me, for the most part. But really, any kind of editing, I just like doing. I also like working and playing inside of a really defined workspace, like having a toolbox in front of me. Like, I don't like the blank canvas. Everyone's afraid of the blank canvas.
Yep.
But some people maybe more than others. And like, I really love the moment where I have a finished game. I have like all the pieces of it. And now it's time to start polishing them.
Right.
Like, that to me, we already have the building blocks and now it's about making the building blocks just so. That is much more satisfying to me than building the building blocks.
Where do you see that else in your life? Right. So I get that, right. The joy of sanding the corners, right. The heavy lifting. And it's funny because there's almost like 2 different types of designers. There's some designers that love the first framing the house, right. And figuring out how many stories it's going to be and the structure of it. And then they struggle to finish. And then there's other designers that are like you that like that piece. Where does that come from?
I don't know.
Well, maybe one way to explore it is where else do you like that outside of design?
Yeah. I mean, I do think I'm a perfectionist in most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I think I also am picky kind of across the board in like what I eat growing up, even before I had Crohn's disease. I like my workspace to be just the way that it is. I like to use a certain kind of pen. I like my car to be a certain color. Like I like certain things, certain ways. And I really like experimenting. I like the iteration in all of those things of trying out different ways to make an omelet. Literally, this is a thing that I did for 6 months. I tried out a lot of different ways to make an omelet. And then I found the one that I was really excited about that made the best omelet for me. And now that's what I have for lunch every day.
That's great.
And I am really happy with that. Like, I don't mind having an omelet for lunch every single day when it's exactly my favorite omelet. And I also really, I like the process of learning. I like the process of experimentation, right? And bouncing ideas off of other people and like trying to learn about other people through that process, not just of like, I'm gonna make my omelet just so, but like, how does my partner like their omelet? Like, let's experiment with that and like learn about them in the process. But also like, let's get better at playing Magic cards by talking about the game we just played and like really putting all our cards on the table. Let's get better at being a human being by laying all our feelings out in front of each other and like talking about our feelings and how that last tough conversation argument just went. I like all of that. And I think maybe it is all in service of I hesitate to say like become the best version of myself or like who I want to be, because that's also always changing. But it feels like it's forward momentum. It feels like it's accomplishing something.
So I'm hearing, and this is because I don't fully understand, but it seems to me I'm hearing a bit of a contradiction.
Yeah,
oh, good. Go for it. I'm hearing a bit of a contradiction, right? So we talk about the iteration process, the editing, going through, and that's a series of failures until it doesn't fail, right? And you enjoy that process of going, that doesn't work. Let's add a little bit more salt, or maybe I should use a pan with this temperature, with this type of fat, right? And so on and so forth. And then finally, you slowly refine through a series of failures, and get to, this is my omelet, the omelet I'm going to eat for lunch every single day. But then I heard you also talk about before you start, and this voice in your head that goes, you're not going to do this well. You're going to fail at this. And you made it clear to me that was something that held you back from trying something. Talk to me about where that is, right? So how does one part of you in a process enjoy a series of failures, yet you have this other part in your head that is failure is a blocker, or maybe it's not a blocker. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think anxiety is a weird, contradictory voice in your head. Hold on. I feel like I have like 3 different really interesting things to say, and I just want to make sure that I don't forget them. I think there's a few things going on here. We're just in therapy now. This is weird, but let's do it.
Welcome to Tabletop Talk.
I love it. Yeah, it's great. So one of the things is that anxiety is just trouble. It is the way it is. It's going to maybe be there, present, about being a failure or being about something. Usually for me, it's actually about not working hard enough, which is ridiculous because of how hard I work. But here we are. My partner hates that about me, but here we are. So I think the voice in my head that I described earlier, that's sort of like holding me back from things, even as I'm over years or decades, like building up the skill for them. I think that voice is trying to protect me from overcommitting to yet another thing.
Interesting.
Or doing the thing, like for a long time this cycle happened for me with being a game designer. And one of the really prominent arguments that voice would have about game design was, there's no money in this, man. Like, you're going to end up like designing all these beautiful games that you love. Then you're going to have to fulfill them. Like, you don't like marketing.
Right.
I hate marketing. I don't want to do that. Like, I'm going to have to ship all these things to people. Like, I'm going to have to go through the whole Kickstarter process. All of that sounds miserable.
Yep.
And so I think it is a little bit less about you're going to be bad at this and more about like, you're busy with all these other things. Like, you don't have space for this in your life. Like, there's so many reasons not to do this, and you should hold on to those. And if the ideas that then break through that voice are the ones that I'm so excited about that I can't not do them.
Got it.
Being a screenwriter feels that way to me, right? Like, I often dream that I was a person who was less compelled to be a screenwriter than I am, so that I could just go have a software job, leave it at the office, and then come home and do my role-playing game thing, But I'm not. I live in this horrible city of Los Angeles, this 100-degree hell on earth today. Like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to live this far away from my family and friends. but boy, do I want to make movies.
Sure.
Yeah. So it broke through in that way.
That helps, right? And it becomes a filter, it sounds like, Sam,
yes.
where it prevents you from engage, because tell me if this is right. This is what it sounds like to me, which is you've got this filter that's active in your head that saves you time. And this filter knows what'll happen when you let this out, that you are going to fixate on this and you're going to drive the goddamn thing into the ground. And maybe this filter is just like, nah, you got to jump this hurdle first before I'm going to allow you to take over Sam's brain.
Yes, that feels right to me. There is one other thing going on that I think is true of this. And also, well, we've been talking a lot about how my brain works, but I think this last thing is really true for most people, which is I think when we are young, we are bad at everything and we are really comfortable being bad at stuff. And as we get older, we become good at some things. And once you are good at some things, it feels extra bad to be bad at other things. So why would I start some new thing that I'm bad at when I can go over here and be good at the thing I'm already good at? And I think I see that a lot. I think you get to be 40 years old or something, and people are like, why would I take up learning the guitar now? I'll never be a famous guitar player. Whereas when you're 16, who knows? But maybe because playing the guitar is nice and makes you feel good. Like, and I think that's a real thing that a lot of people struggle with. It's certainly something that I am learning to deal with myself. And I think it plays into this same dynamic we've been talking about.
Yeah. And it's very hard for me to empathetically understand those people because it's diametrically opposed to how I am. And it sounds like you're similar, Sam. I love the process of learning.
Yeah.
Like I loved teaching myself guitar. I loved teaching myself banjo. I am a bad banjo player. I'm a bad guitarist. That's not what it was about, right? It was about the process of going through it. All right, last question on this piece. I use this analogy of you jumping this last hurdle in your mind, and then once you jump that, then you're good to go. Can you give me something that has been rattling around your brain that has not broken out and may never break out?
Oh, that easy answer, the one that I'm most acutely aware of, is crowdfunding a physical RPG, because I know at this point it's going to happen and I resent it already. But I feel like that's not the spirit of what you're asking. I feel like the thing that I want
something that's, is never going to happen.
Oh, that it's never going to happen.
Never going to happen. And maybe you've put it to bed, but it's rattled in your brain as long as Dice Exploder did.
Singing.
Oh, interesting. Really?
Yeah. I enjoyed singing a lot. I still love karaoke. I was in church choir growing up. I had a high school choir teacher tell me, I was in a musical. I got cast in a musical. I was not in the high school choir. But the high school choir teacher was directing the musical, and I sang my, here's my thing where I am. I'm just in the cast, or I'm just in the background. And he looked at me and he went, you should have been in choir. And then he moved on to the next person. And I was like, oh no, I'll never be good at singing now. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that's silly. I could absolutely work on singing and be a better singer if I wanted to. But I can tell, God, I would really enjoy that. I love performing. I love music. I honestly, playing piano, even a better answer here.
Okay.
Where it's just kind of, I had a good piano in my office for a long time, and I just never played it. I'm just not going to do it. My dad plays great piano. But all that stuff, if I wanted to get the performing on stage kick, I would go to stand up. I think that's another thing that's going to break through at some point more than it has. And if I want the music thing, I'll go do some karaoke. But I do not feel that doing the music is as important to me as, I could go back to painting. I have a painting right here in my office that I did that I'm still very proud of. I did it when I was 16, and that's one I could go back to. But music is never going there.
So there's a multiverse future where you and I bump into each other somewhere. And it's like, shit, Sam, how you doing? I haven't talked to you in a while. And I say to you, what the hell happened to Dice Exploder? So in that future where you stopped doing Dice Exploder, how would you explain to me why you stopped? What do you think would be the likely culprit?
My hope is that my answer would be, what are you talking about? Wendy Yu is still making it.
Interesting.
That, like, I intentionally wanted to set up the show so that it would be possible to hand over to someone else for a season. Like, I really love the seasonal model for podcasts for a lot of reasons, mostly workload reasons. But another reason is that this is something I've already been having conversations about with various other people. Like, do you want to come on and just run the show however you want to run it for 8 episodes, for 3 episodes, or 1 episode, whatever you're comfortable with? And I really like that format. I want to do that. I think that's a way to bring more diversity to the show and conversations. You know, you can imagine just handing that over to someone who's not a white guy to like get that voice in there. But you can also imagine handing that over to a D&D person to really get into D&D, or to a LARP person to really get into LARP or other styles of play that I'm less knowledgeable about. But the other answer that I would hope to give you is, well, I went off to direct a movie. Like, I'm making movies now, man. I don't have time anymore. I'm long hours on set.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. So those are my answers. But also, like another answer I hope I give is like, that's a great point. I should go make another season of that. Like, another thing, like, I was telling Sydney Icarus, you should just make another season of The Hard Boom. Like, I'm sure you're busy right now, but like, you can have a 10-year hiatus and come back. Why not? Twin Peaks did 25 years or whatever, right? Like,
nothing's stopping us, right?
Nothing's stopping us.
Oh, that's really funny. So, guys, the Insider Insight series allows me to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, and creators and learn how they approach their work. I try to understand their process, inspiration, and methods for crafting their creations. We've already talked about Dice Exploder. When we get back from this break, we're going to talk about a game that he co-designed with Jason Morningstar. We're going to talk about Northfield. We'll be right back. Hey, Future Craig here. Season 4 of Sam's podcast is funding right now on BackerKit. The link is below in the show notes. It only has a few days left, and as I'm saying this, it's a few bucks short of funding. Can we show Sam what us floorheads do? Because we support our creators. Could you go check it out? It's a great podcast, and if you back it and regret it, I owe you a beer. So Northfield, it was funny when I sent you the first version of the call sheet, I had just Dice Exploder in there. Part of it was because I looked at your games and I'm like, I'm not sure which one we can do it. Maybe we'll just focus on Dice Exploder. And you came back with me and said, Craig, you may want to, talk a little bit about my RPG cred, and it came up, like, for example, the game I made with Jason Morningstar, and I'm like, what? So I've been excited to talk about Dice Exploder. I thoroughly enjoyed talking about Dice Exploder, but I was just like, wait a second, I want to talk about Northfield. And what really happened is that I went and tracked this game down and looked at it. I'm like, holy shit. So let me give the blurb for everybody that's listening, and then we've got a lot to talk about. Here's the blurb. Get your guns, boys. They're robbing the bank. It's a great line. In 1876, it means the James Younger gang has come to Northfield, riding high off a big haul in the Kansas Pacific Railroad and eager to sweeten the pot in a harmless little Minnesota town. It means that things are about to go sideways. In 2026, it also means that the James Younger gang has come to Northfield, or rather, the people who play them at the Defeat of Jesse James Day's 150th anniversary reenactment. It's a fun little slogan, but things are still going to go sideways because Northfield, Minnesota was never harmless. Northfield is a game about modern families, memory, small town life, and that day in 1876 when Jesse James robbed the bank in Northfield, Minnesota. So first of all, great effing pitch. One I did not see coming. When I got to that second paragraph and I saw it in 2026, I was like, whoa, here we go. This is going to be good. You've listened to the show, so you know what I want to know is the day before. anything that became Northfield existed. What was the seed? What was the acorn?
I want to start and say we're going to talk about stuff with this in process, and that's going to be amazing. I also did record a whole episode of Dice Exploder with Jason Morningstar talking about our process over this game. So if the next half hour here is really exciting to you, the listener, you can go get another 45 minutes over there.
It was literally last segment you said, Craig, I hate marketing.
Well, listen, I'm great on a podcast. Have me on your podcast. I don't know what to do on social media. I don't understand social media. But yes, the first seed of this idea was Jason Morningstar was Jason Morningstar in the Dice Exploder Discord offhandedly mentioning that it'd be fun to collaborate with me. And I was like, what?
Dude.
I'm sorry. Excuse me?
Yeah.
I had learned a few months earlier that we were friends. That was news to me, but it was very welcome news. I love Jason and always have.
He's one of the good ones, man. He's just a good human.
He's a good human. And I also, I'm kind of building up Jason here. We both are, but I also just want to like step in and be like, Jason's just a guy.
Just a dude. Yep.
Everyone who's making RPGs is just someone. Like they're just a person. David Lynch brought up earlier. He's just a weird guy. So Jason was like, do you want to collaborate? And I was like, I'm busy and drowning under work, but obviously I'm going to make time for that. So I did. And we got into each other's DMs in Discord, and we started by just sending a bunch of pitches to each other of like, here's little game ideas that we have. And one of my ideas was this game Northfield. And I can keep going here, but if you have anything you're interested in following up
you're
on.
skipping something then, right?
Yeah.
So I get that, and this is the pitch that obviously grabbed. So I want to continue that part, but I need to go backwards a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So where does this pitch come from?
Yes. So I am from Northfield, Minnesota. This is a real event that really happened. Jesse James tried to rob the place. I grew up with the Defeat of Jesse James Days carnival and fair and reenactments happening close to my house. You could hear from our house, like a mile away from Division Street, like Main Street, every fall, every September, you'd start hearing like fireworks or gunshots or something going off. And you'd be like, what's good? Oh, they're doing the reenactment again. Oh, okay, great. And it was just sort of the thing that you did on the weekend in September. And as I grew up, I realized that this was a weird carnival. This was like, it went from, let's go on the roller coaster to, I guess it was the tilt-a-whirl and the Ferris wheel, and not even big enough for a roller coaster, right? Sure. Not even a small one to bring in. But I was like, I think it was a friend of mine in high school was like, why don't they call it Joseph Lee Haywood Days? And I was like, who's Joseph Lee Haywood? He was like, he's the guy who was the bank teller when the James gang like came to town to rob a bank. And Jesse James came in and stuck a gun in his face and was like, give me all the money. And Joseph Lee Haywood was like, no. And so Jesse James shot him in the head and he died a few days later, I believe, maybe instantly. And they took the like $15 in cash on hand and they got out of there and they'd been shot up. A couple of them had been killed and the gang kind of dispersed after that. And my friend was telling me this and I was like, wait, why don't they call it Joseph Lee Haywood Days? Like he's the hero here, right? Like, of course he's the hero. And like, as soon as you say that out loud, like everyone I think gets a little indignant. Like, yeah, why don't they? But also everyone's like, yeah, but it's Jesse James is the famous guy. You put the famous guy in the name of the thing. Like, it's the thing that you do. It's Jesse James Days. And the longer I sat with that, the more I was like, oh, yeah, great. We're just like fine adding to the myth and the legend of this horrible racist murderer.
Yes, terrible human being. Yeah.
Terrible human being.
Yep.
In exchange for like better marketing for our little local tourist trap carnival. And, you know, maybe even there's this like kind of subtle Midwestern thing where it's maybe even like, you know, the legend of Jesse James gets bigger, then like so does ours because we beat him. I'm just saying, like a little bit of that kind of vibe going on. And all of this was just like, that's weird. I don't like any of that. I don't like that. And also, it's a fun carnival though. How do I like square those two things in my head? It's just like a weird dissonance. I like going down and like having mini donuts and like reconnecting with my high school friends' moms and like whatever. It's just like fun to go to a little fair. So I think that there's, as you grow up and get more distant from, not even just like as you grow up, but anytime you leave a community or leave a space, leave a thought process, the further away you get from it, the more you're able to look back on it and see what was strange about it. And I think I still go back to Northfield for months at a time even. And it's taken a long time, I think, to get the distance to really be like, that's weird and no one's talking about it.
Right.
And that had really just been a seed in my head for a long time. So that's really where the idea started from. And then obviously, like what it was, this honestly, that little dissonance was in my head. But then I'm sitting there putting together a list of game ideas to send to Jason friggin' Morningstar. And I'm like, I have these like few pitches, whatever, but like I should brainstorm a few more. Like, is there any piece of history that I'm interested in? Because I know Jason likes making games about history.
Jason loves that shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, there's one piece of history that is stuck in my craw. And so I threw it on there, and I was like, that's the game that we're going to make. And then Jason was like, I want to do that one. And I was like, I know you do. And
how different was that pitch that you gave Jason from what I just read?
Ooh, do you want to hear the original pitch?
That would make me so happy right now.
Great. Let's pull it up. So this is what I originally sent Jason. It's part of a spreadsheet. This is idea number 7 of 8. The placeholder name for the project is Jesse James Days. The description of the project is: the town I grew up in, Northfield, Minnesota, is locally famous as the place that defeated the James Younger gang when they tried to rob the local bank and were chased out of town. The town holds an annual carnival and does reenactments of the bank raid, and it functions as a mini state fair. There's a lot of weird energy. We're celebrating the defeat of murderers, but we also named the event after them because Jesse James has been so thoroughly mythologized. It's a fun little carnival, but also tons of locals hate it because the town gets so flooded by people from out of town. Maybe this is just the fiasco playset you get when you shuffle the Old West and small town playsets together. And then I added a comment of, I don't know if/where there's a game in this, but I figured I'd include the bit of very specific history that I'm most interested in and knowledgeable about before sending this to Jason.
So amazing, right? The first thing that pops into my head is, where's the game? Mm-hmm. Right. And you acknowledge that in the pitch.
Yeah.
The next thing that pops in my head is, where's the 150th? Where's 2026?
Yeah.
So as Jason goes, that's what we're going to do. You got the two of you start. Where does the time jump happen? Right. Because you two could have easily made a game that was a reenactment of the Jesse James robbery, right? In Northfield. And that could have been an amazing game, right? Yeah. But that's not what this game is. Where does the jump happen?
I really expected it to be that game, to be a game about the reenactment of the community a little bit more. Not that it's not about the community. It's very much about the community. But Jason has recently, in a lot of different contexts, not just this game, but several other games he's working on and published recently, been really interested in playing around with time as like a designable surface in games, as he would say. And so he was really interested right away in, I want to play with the time angle on this. I want to do both at the same time. And that became a design goal for us right out of the gate.
Interesting.
I also really like playing with time. I like time travel movies. I like Pulp Fiction's weird organization of itself. I like that stuff. And so when Jason was like, I want to do that, I was like, yeah, definitely. Cool. Let's do that version. And we tried a number of different mechanics for how that might work before we ended up at the one that is in the game, where you sort of do a little bit of robbery, a little bit of present day, a little bit of robbery, a little bit of present day. But we tried like an other kind dice kind of thing where you're doing both at the same time, sort of, and some other weird things. We tried like all of one and then all of the other, or like a random mashup of orderings of like maybe it's random chance when you're moving from one to the next. But yeah, we started right away on that.
So we're going through your favorite thing, the iteration process at that point. We're trying different mechanics. When did you know that you'd gotten through the series of failures to where you needed to be? When did you know at a basic level, this is going to be the heart of the game? There's going to be some refinements that happen later. Yeah. But I think we're going to be building off of this now. When did that happen?
I think for Jason, I don't want to speak for Jason. I'll take that back. For me, I don't know where it was for Jason.
Yep.
But for me, there was this clear vision I felt like he had for a way to do a little bit of bank raid, a little bit of reenactment, and back and forth. And I liked that as a structure, but I did not understand, okay, we're going to do a little bit of bank raid. What does that mean? What are we actually doing as players during the little bit of bank raid? Because we know how it's going to end, right? Like if we're just sort of like maybe we're like rolling dice to like see what happens. Like this is a different game, right? The James Younger gang comes to town. It's an alternate history. We're going to like roll dice to find out if they can succeed at robbing the bank. And then when they make a roll, we also play out the results of what happens with the reenactment. That's kind of cool. I like that. But that's not, we wanted to do commentary on the real events. And I just couldn't understand how it was going to happen. And so I asked him, like, what is that gameplay like? And he said, you answer a question like this. Like, and he like just came up with a prompt off the top of his head for the kind of question that is then in the actual game. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's it.
Now, can we give an example of that type of a question so people can kind of get an understanding of gameplay?
Yeah, let me pull up the game. Yeah, so an example prompt from the game is from partway through the robbery. This is a prompt aimed at all of the robbers. When Jesse shot down some unarmed Swedish farmer just because, how did that make you feel? That guy's dead as snakes for no reason at all. Is this who you are now, or is this who you've always been?
So that prompt comes out.
Yeah.
What happens next?
Yeah. So, you mean in the design process or in gameplay?
No, in gameplay.
Yeah. So in gameplay, the robbery is divided into 6 minutes, which is how long the robbery really happened. And there's also 6 players at the table. And ideally, it works fine with 4 or 5. And you get 2 prompts at once. So you get that one that's aimed at everyone, but you also every minute get a prompt that's aimed at one person in particular. So, for example, the companion prompt to that one at everyone is specifically to Bob Younger, who has just been shot off his horse. You shot your gun and shouted for them to clear the streets, and some bastard shot your horse out from under you, just dead as a post, and down you came like a fool. How does it feel to be a perpetual burden on your brothers?
Oh, nice.
How can you stand to beg for a ride? And so it's sort of Bob's minute, right? And Bob gets to lead the conversation about, okay, which of these prompts are we answering first, and what are we doing? But Bob will usually like chime in with like, it feels terrible, but like Jim's been being nice to me so I asked Jim for a ride. And then everyone else kind of chimes in on the everyone prompt, right? Of like, God, Jesse's busy over there just like shooting this guy. Maybe Bob is over here like asking Jesse for the ride because he's actually still looking up. He's like, wow, that's cool. You just shot a guy. Hey, you're great. Get me up on your horse. But so the table kind of negotiates that minute of the robbery through engaging with those prompts. And it feels, this is the thing that really clicked in for me about how the game functions. It's not, the gameplay is not what happens. The gameplay is so much more, how do you feel about it?
Right.
Which is something that feels very For the Queen to me. And I think prompts in general are really good at how do you feel about that, and a little bit less good at okay, then what happens next? Because then you just have to make something up. And you feel a way about that minute. And then we flash back to that's the 4th minute of the robbery. So then we flash forward to the 4th minute of the present day robbery. And there's 2 present day prompts of the same variety. And there's a lot of like mirrored language. So Bob gets shot off his horse, but the reenactor, of course, knows that's coming. So there's a very similar prompt of like, you tumble off this horse and like, you spent all this time practicing and then you fucking tanked it. Like, like you just ate shit. How do you feel about that? Right.
Yeah.
And then you get to use the echo of what happened in the actual robbery to kind of inform the present day experience.
And is someone playing Bob in both eras?
Yes. So everyone is playing Bob and Bob's reenactor, who is Tom Knutson. Great.
So when you played it most recently in its fully formed current state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was there something that surprised you? So you've been working on this piece, that piece, this piece, that piece, thrown away stuff, put stuff in. What surprised you when you went through the entire game from start to finish?
So I've gotten to play the game twice. And the first time I played it in Northfield with my partner who went to college in Northfield. That's how we met. And my parents. And
no shit.
That was fun. And it really just worked immediately. Jason had already play tested the game once. And so I knew going in his feedback that it basically functioned and was good, but like some corners to watch for. And that felt really good. But going into it the most recent time that I've played, I didn't know that this game would function if you weren't either someone who knew a lot about history like Jason or someone who grew up in Northfield and residents of Northfield like my parents. And I loved the way it came out. It was people just got it immediately. They understood. And there was a point, right, where one of them's like, Jesse's running around, or all of us go inside the bank. And I'm sitting there like, only 2 of us went inside the bank. And then I was like, but who cares? Like, it's fine. We're all in the bank now. Like, that's role-playing games.
Yeah.
And also a moment where I think a lot of people like me in that moment kind of get hung up on, if the game is about real history, what really did happen? I can't contradict that. I have to like be nice to these people and this history because it's real. And there was one moment at the table where someone was like, how do we feel about that? And I was like, Cole Younger was an unrepentant racist and murderer. Like, fuck his history. Like, we don't care about him. Like, you shouldn't care about him either. And you should do whatever you want. And they were like, oh, great. And then did whatever they wanted. And we told a great story. And I love that. The other thing that's in the design of the game and in the history is that the James Younger gang was such a family affair, right? It's 3 younger brothers, 2 James brothers, and then 3 other randos. Who are incidentally played by 1 player at the table, the 3 randos,
nice.
Which is an interesting little twist and roll for people. But in the present day, the reenactment scene, like in real life, is also a very family affair. It's a lot of almost like dynasties of families that are, bringing their kids into the reenactment because that's what the family's about. And so we made it so that all the familial relationships in the past match in the present.
Right.
So if you are a younger brother in the past, then you are a Knutson brother or sister in the present. And that makes the game such a family affair. It is so much a game about family in a way that I did not expect.
Right.
And that was really cool to see also. So I don't know. I think the thing that was astounding to me was just that the game functioned after I felt for a long time like, I don't know that this game works. And not just that it functioned, but that it really felt so clean. And also going back to the very beginning of our conversation here, Craig, only about an hour long. Like, you really could bust this out at game night with the family.
That's where I was headed. Yep.
I don't know that the family wants to do the like unrepentant racist game. So like maybe there's a version of this game that someone else can write or that I can write in the future that is using the same framework, but bringing it to a different story. Or just maybe it's just good evidence that like card prompt based games can fit into that time slot really well for the Queen. Great. But it really was this, I think, perfect marriage of Jason's taste with my taste, of being a functional game, and being like a great emotional experience and a teaching tool, and 70 minutes of gameplay. I'm just so proud of everything. Like I played this at Breakout Con at like 11 at night, and everyone was like, we kind of want to get to bed by midnight. And I was like, I have the game for that.
I got it.
It was really great to be able to say that.
Yeah. All right. So I take Northfield and I bring it to somebody who doesn't know that you made it, but they're familiar with you, right? So they've played some of your other games. They're familiar with it. I put it in front of them. They flip through and they say to me, did Sam write this? Where's your fingerprint? Right. So what is distinctly you that somebody who's familiar with your work would recognize?
Well, the game does come with a personal essay that is by me that is reflecting on a lot of the history we've kind of covered here. They didn't read that. I don't know. Even if that essay isn't signed, my voice is in there. And I think that carries through into the prompts too. Like Jason, I think I have a very strong writing voice that I have developed over a long period of time. And we should talk about
how do you categorize that? So what does that mean?
So I think that I write the way that I talk. Like there's almost no separation between the two. Maybe I take out filler words. And I think that's more uncommon than I would like. I
can see that.
I think people don't do that very often. But I think people have much more distinctive speaking voices than writing voices. So I think that that's part of where my voice is coming from. But also, part of it is just that I've always just had a strong voice because I'm lucky. Like, I think I have a sensibility to my taste that I got maybe from like mainlining Discworld books when I was a child and running them through the Malcolm in the Middle that I was watching. And like, that's where my voice is. But I think practice and just talking and like thinking and protecting your own ideas. I think that's another important way to establish voice. Remember.
Oh, wait, what does that mean? What do you mean protecting your ideas?
Yeah. Yes. So I remember the first movie I ever went to go see by myself was a movie called Short Term 12. It's very good. It was Brie Larson's kind of breakout role. I think Rami Malek and a couple other people are in it too that are now famous. Really, really good movie. And I remember walking out and being like, it was amazing to go see this movie by myself. I love seeing this movie by myself. And then I like started reading reviews of it. And a lot of the reviews kind of agreed with me, but I disagreed about some stuff in the reviews. And I was like, oh, for the first time in my life, I did not walk out of the movie and then immediately have my opinion of the movie shaped by the person that I was there with.
Oh, interesting.
And integrating, I think that conversation right after a movie is a lot about, we're going to get on the same page. That's what human beings want to do.
We're going to negotiate this. Yep.
We're going to negotiate this. We're going to compare notes, and we don't like conflicts because we're human beings, and at least human beings coming out of a movie. And like this is the thing that we're going to do now. And then we are really going to walk away like kind of both with like that melded opinion as our own. And this became a practice for me that I really love, of going to see movies by myself and intentionally taking a lot of time afterwards to just sit and consciously develop my own opinion about them before I then go out and try to, like, I love film criticism as a way to help me understand how I feel about a movie, or just help me understand other people. You know, I love that. I do love that conversation after the movie of like getting to know Craig by talking about what we thought of Furiosa, right? But I started to put a lot of value on, yes, I want Craig to change my mind, and I want to understand Craig and like know who you are. But I also want to hold on to where I started so that I have a memory of that and a map of that and a better understanding of who I was at the start of this conversation. And I think that's a really important ingredient for developing your voice at large, is to have your own opinions and to not be afraid to express them, even as you are. I think it's also so important to be open to change, but I think it is important to understand yourself and to not be ashamed of yourself.
I don't say this very often. I've never thought of it that way. And I think that's a really neat way to think about it, because what I'm hearing, Sam, is giving yourself time, right? Giving yourself time to sort through your opinion. And then once that's done, then engaging, right? And then putting that up against something, not in a conflicting sort of way, but in that collaborative sort of way.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's a really cool concept. I'm going to have to stew on that for a little bit.
I also want to say, I think there's the giving yourself some time. There's two different kinds of time there that are both really important. And the first kind of time is to just vibe. Like, we're going to do a recommendations segment, like what am I jamming on segment at some point here. And I'm going to talk for 10 minutes straight about Challengers and how much I loved Challengers. And when I walked out of that movie, you better believe I listened to that soundtrack 3 times in a row on the walk home. Like, I loved that. I wanted to just sit with that feeling and then wait a couple of days, let it kind of linger, come back, and then like, okay, cool. How do I feel about it now? All of that. But it's equally important to consciously think about, why did I respond to Challengers? Why did I experience this? Where are my emotions coming from? All of that kind of understanding of yourself too. You got to do the active thing, but also like the passive thing is important. Like you do gotta let your brain just like dwell and gel and do its background task thing. But yeah, you can't neglect either of those if you really want to hold on to that, who you are and what you think, part of taste.
It's a super important activity, because I see that as a safe way to train yourself how to do that with things that really matter, right? So if your partner makes you upset, to learn to say, well, the first thing I need to figure out is, why did it make me upset? Not why I hate them right now. All of that's really obvious. It's very surface. But when my partner says something that hurt, why? Why does that hurt me? What is driving that? And that's an incredible training ground for that.
That's why games are good. That's why Magic the Gathering is great, is because I spent all this time going to Magic tournaments and having to, one, get comfortable losing and failing, get comfortable being wrong, having made a decision and then learning that I was wrong and I should do better in the future. Talking with other people and community after the fact, like even if whether you lost the game or whether you won the game, sitting down with people and talking about what could I have done better next time. All of that is practice for the moments where it really matters, for the fights with your partner, for presidential elections, like for everything. Like that's what games are best at and why I love them.
Yeah. I don't think I have ever framed it in my head that way, but I could not agree more.
And story games, right, are like I like that in the competition sense. That's a whole set of lessons you can learn. But like then like taking that practice, rehearsal, processing, trying things out to story games is like a whole other medium for doing the same thing too, in an even more complicated way.
So guys, we're going to take one more break and we're going to do exactly what Sam talked about. We're going to find out what the hell's he been grooving on. We'll be right back. Are you enjoying our long form interviews with creatives on this podcast? Maybe you're craving deeper discussions about our guests or some of the RPG plays on our Twitch and YouTube channel. Well, I've got an opportunity for you. You see, Third Floor Wars now has a Patreon-only Discord server. You can join a vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts diving deep into every episode of our RPG plays and podcast, connect with fans, engage in spirited discussions, and unlock the behind-the-scenes insights. For just $1 a month, access a world of tabletop gaming goodness. Connect with passionate gamers who share your love for the Tabletop Podcast and everything produced on the Third Floor. As a Patreon supporter, you also enjoy ad-free episodes of this podcast. You can immerse yourselves in captivating stories and fascinating interviews without interruptions, taking your listening experience to a whole new level. By joining the Third Floor Wars Patreon community, you not only gain exclusive access to the Patreon-only Discord server, but you also support the growth of my podcast and channels. Your contributions enable me to continue creating high-quality content that entertains, educates, and upskills tabletop enthusiasts like yourself. Maybe don't wait. Join the Third Floor Wars Patreon today and unlock a world of camaraderie, discussions, and knowledge. Visit patreon.com/Third Floor Wars or check the link in the show notes and come join our community. The Third Floor Wars Patreon-only Discord server awaits you. I and the other patrons can't wait to welcome you with open arms and a fistful of dice. So this is how I end every episode now. It was not always the case. It just organically came. And what I found to be interesting is when I talk to somebody who makes things and who creates things, I find it very insightful to learn what they love to consume. So we hinted at it a little bit, and I want to start there. Tell me about Challengers.
Yeah. So Challengers is known from its marketing as the Zendaya threesome movie. It is about tennis primarily. It's these two guys, they're friends. They are up and coming, like wannabe pro tennis players. They're in high school. They meet Zendaya, who is in the same position. They both think she's amazing and want to date her. Then the three of them have various tumultuous romantic and professional and competitive relationships over the next 10 plus years. And it culminates in the greatest climax, pun intended, the climax is playing tennis, maybe pun still intended, of like a movie that I feel like I've seen in a long time. This story is also told non-linearly, like in a way we were kind of hinting at earlier, like Pulp Fiction. It's really effective in the way that it does that. And it is a movie about, I heard some critic describe it as, I don't know if this is the queerest straight movie I've ever seen or the straightest queer movie I've ever seen. But it is doing something there. And all of that is present, and I don't want to detract from that. There are many people who love the movie for what it's doing in that regard, and I do too. But for me, this is the movie that taught me why I love competition. And it is not just for all the reasons that I laid out at the end of the last segment, although I do love competition for those reasons. And I think those reasons are in some ways present in what Challengers has to say. But Challengers, and particularly its ending, makes a case that competition is a medium by which to understand the person that you are competing. And that winning is great. Like to get to that level of understanding that competition can allow, you do need to value winning. You do need to push forward and really, really do your best to crush the opposition. But also, when you do that, you can create something beautiful. You can create a relationship. You can see into someone's soul in a way that you cannot in any other context. And the filmmaking is weird and audacious. The acting is incredible. I just loved everything about it. And then those last few minutes, I was shouting at the theater. I was the guy shouting at the screen in a crowded theater. And I'm not even embarrassed. It really was just a revelation for me.
So you had an immediate response to it. That's obvious, right? What was something that after you went through the process we talked about emerged? Yeah. So what did you figure out later?
That's a great question. I think in the moment, this is bordering on spoiler territory, but I'll try to hold off.
No, standard thing. We'll spoil the shit out of this. If you're listening right now and don't want Challengers spoiled, pause, go watch Challengers, come back and listen to the rest of the episode.
I'm still going to keep it light on spoilers, but I think the two men in the movie, so pretty early in the movie and in the trailer, Zendaya suffers a career-ending injury and isn't able to compete. And the boys then keep competing, and she coaches and marries one of them, and has other kinds of professional and romantic relationships with the other. And in the climax, I really understood in the theater what was going on with the boys. And I think the longer I sat with it, the more it hit me what was going on with Zendaya's character.
How so?
She loses the most important thing in her life. She is the one who teaches the boys in this movie that thing I was saying about tennis is a relationship. And she loses her ability to access that relationship because she can't play it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And through the course of the movie, she regains the ability to access that relationship through watching other people, and particularly these boys, play. And that was also a revelation to me, that it's not just that like I can learn about you by playing Magic the Gathering with you, but that like I can learn about Jason by watching you and Jason play Magic. I can learn about your relationship and see the beautiful thing that you two create together and like receive that gift. And that can be just as beautiful a result of competition as participating.
It's funny because, you know, a lot of times I'll hear people say, you know, I can't watch other people play games. Like they'll say, you know, I don't understand it, like how you can watch somebody play on Twitch, play a video game on Twitch, or watch, you know, two people play Magic the Gathering and people will watch hours and hours of that. A lot of people don't understand. Why are you watching people play role-playing games?
Yeah.
Right. Well, how is that fun? And I think of what you just said is a big part of that, right? Is that you are learning about the game. You're learning about the people that are playing the game. You are doing your own version of what we talked about at the very beginning, that director's commentary, where you're trying to suss out, why did they play those lands then, right? Why did they bring out that card at that point in time?
Yeah.
And you go through the iterations in your head of what may have led them to that decision. And it can be very revealing about the people that you're watching, but ultimately it can also be very revealing about how you take in information, how you process information, and how you make decisions. It's super interesting.
It's like any other work of art, right? Like Challengers was a revealing movie to me. And part of the point of filmmaking is to do that, to reach out and offer me something. And I think the thing that Challengers taught me, or one of the things that it taught me, is that two people playing a game are creating that work of art that I can receive. They're creating a performance that I can tap into.
Yeah. All right. So what's next? What's something else that has just gotten its hooks into you?
Yeah. So a lot of what I consume is references for whatever I'm writing or designing. So right now I am writing a whodunit set at a chess tournament. So I have been watching a lot of movies that are whodunits and movies that involve chess. And of those, I love Glass Onion in particular, the second Knives Out movie. I just love that movie. It's embarrassing, frankly, how much I love that movie. I've seen that movie. What is
it about Glass Onion that you love so much?
It's just a Swiss watch. It's just every single frame of that movie is perfectly setting up or paying off something else, or being funny or revealing character, or most often doing 6 of those things at the same time.
Yep. It's efficient as hell. I agree.
It's so good. And it's just every time I watch it, there's new little things in it. And I don't know. I love the structure of whodunits. I'm a structure heavy writer, or that's maybe not even true anymore, but it was when I started writing at the very least. And it's kind of a interesting thing to note about myself. I don't know that I've noticed that before. Anyway, like structure really speaks to me, and I love that formula. And I think Glass Onion is just dancing with that formula in such a fun way. And it's hilarious. It's just...
Well, and I mean, it's perfectly executed, unbelievable cast. Like there is, talk about not a weak spot. So my question is then, did you have a similar reaction to Knives Out?
Yeah. Yes. Although less so. Like
Why?
Knives Out, I really liked a lot. And I feel a lot of the same. Honestly, you just take everything I said about Glass Onion, but say it 10% less enthusiastically. And I think it's true about Knives Out also. I don't even know what it is that really put Glass Onion over the top for me. I think maybe it's just brighter movie. You know, it's in this tropical location.
Yep.
And so it feels more fun. Knives Out felt fun, but to me, Glass Onion is like explicitly like Rian Johnson wrote that movie during lockdown and was imagining being on a cushy island somewhere. And that's text in the movie. That's just in there. And it feels that way to me. It feels explicitly like an escape. I remember they didn't really put it in theaters for very long, but because I live in LA, I get all the cool theater stuff. And they did a couple of week or 1 week run of Glass Onion. And I got to see it twice in theaters. And walking out, it really was just, oh, I liked this one better. I didn't expect that. Like, he did it again. And then also it was brighter. It was more fun. It felt like a return to cinemas to me. It felt like a roller coaster in the way that the first one felt like a good book.
That's actually a great way to categorize it. So here's an interesting question, because you have a very unique perspective. And hopefully this question makes sense. If it doesn't, just say, Craig, I don't know what you're talking about. How do you watch a movie a second time?
Depends on the movie.
Okay.
And depends on what I'm interested in. So with Glass Onion, the second time I watched it was going back to theaters. And it was just like, I loved that roller coaster. I want to ride it again.
Got it.
And Glass Onion has a structure to it that rewards a second viewing in particular, right? It's playing with time in a particular way. And I knew it would be fun to sort of see all the like setups that you didn't know were setups the first time. And I just went in and I was like the Leo DiCaprio pointing at the TV meme of like, oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. It was like, yeah, cool. I'm a little bit sort of like seeing the matrix of how the movie was put together, but mostly still from the perspective of like, I loved this. And I think more often than not that I loved this the first time. Love it again. Let's go is sort of the way that I'm watching a movie a second time. But of course, there's also the like, OK, I'm working on a whodunit. I'm writing a script. Like, I have specific questions about my story that I'm hoping to like gain insight on from Glass Onion or from the 1970s Murder on the Orient Express that I watched a few nights ago and was going to bring up next. Right. Like I'm watching, which I've also seen before. I'm sitting down and watching these movies specifically to try to help answer some questions, to see how the watch is put together, like kick the struts on the side of the roller coaster, not just go on it. And sometimes that happens really like automatically, maybe even the first time watching a movie. But the second time, especially, maybe I'm going into it with that intention and I'm maybe even taking notes while I watch it.
Can you share, Sam, a question you've been trying to answer with what you're working on right now? And that you've sought as you've watched all of these chess movies and all these whodunits?
Yeah, a really basic one I was trying to answer was, how many suspects do I?
Oh,
because one suspect, that's a movie, but that's not a whodunit anymore. Like that's a different genre. 2 suspects, 3 suspects, that's probably not enough either. And also maybe maybe that actually works pretty well for like network television. A lot of like hour-long procedural shows have just a couple of suspects and you kind of ping pong between. Maybe that would work fine. Maybe I should go think about that. But that's not the classic. Like I've read a lot of Agatha Christie books too, right? Like it feels like there's a crowd of suspects that feeling that underlines the kind of movie that I wanted to write here. So I thought about Glass Onion. I honestly, the first thing I did, I went and looked at the movie poster. Like, how many people are on this poster? And on Knives Out, it's a lot of people. And on Glass Onion, it's a touch fewer. And on Knives Out, there are fewer characters that you can point at and be like, they're not actually a real suspect. Like, they're just kind of like a hanger-on, but they made it onto the poster to try to fill out the cast. And on Glass Onion, there are even more of those. Glass Onion, there's really like 4+1 suspects, but even that gets murky, right? Like you can get a really low number, whereas Knives Out was a pretty high number. Then Murder on the Orient Express has 12, so you really get
right up to the end. So,
exactly, right. And that has 12, I think, only because there are 12 members of a jury, and they get to talk about that as sort of a thing that happens in the movie. And cool, special circumstances, you can get up that high. But like, those two movies together felt like they really gave me a solid range.
Now there's two, now that I'm thinking about this, and I've never really thought about this before, so I appreciate it. There's the whodunit that slowly the suspects fall to the side, right? It refines, and then it gets down to 2, maybe 3. Then there's the big reveal. This is actually what did happen. This is what happened. Then there are those that you have 5 or 6 right until the end, and you don't know until the very end. Either of those appealing to you? Are you drawn to either one of those structures as you're working on your movie?
I think that question to me is more a question of what the particular story wants. Often I think a whodunit is, you can start it from a particular like clue or almost like mechanical device inside the movie, some trick. The Knives Out, Glass Onion movies have all started from like a structural twist, like in the way the story is told. You could also start from a particular character relationship or something. Like you could start from chess tournament. Cool. I started this one from 2 detectives competing to solve the case. Wanted to do that and like write something about competition. Lucky for me, Challengers came out. And that brought me to chess tournament. And then that felt like a nice plug in, right? But the specific thing you were talking about of like, okay, are we going to slowly winnow away the suspects, or are we going to keep it open until the end? I think the important thing to me for the genre of like Agatha Christie whodunit is the initial feeling of it could be anyone. Look at all these people. There's like a whole community and all of them wanted to kill the person who died. And that feeling at the top of the story is more important than how you get to the resolution at the end to me.
What are, in your mind, as you've been digging into this, what's important in the second act? What is important? We've established everybody. We've got the third act where we're going to resolve everything. What is important in the second act, in your mind, that can make or break something?
Character.
How so?
Yeah, it's just storytelling. If your story doesn't have an emotional arc, so it will take a mystery. If it's just the facts, and then we like locked room mysteries, a lot of like really good old locked room mysteries. I revisited some when I started this project. They're puzzles. Maybe they're technically a story, but they're puzzles.
Yep.
Or they are a story insofar as they are like taking you through the thrill of the arc of solving a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's not expected that you could ever really put together like who happened or like how the murderer got into the locked room and then escaped. But I mean, the genre literally started from that place of like, these are puzzles to be solved. And that's great. Love that, obviously. Love a puzzle. But I'm here to take people on an emotional journey. That's what I'm most interested in as a storyteller. And I like the structure of a whodunit still. I like solving a puzzle. But those to me are the sideshow for I want an emotional arc. I want to learn about characters. I want to see them grow and change. And only through the crucible of a story and all that stuff in the second act can people grow and change in at least traditional Western stories. If
I was going to categorize what makes the movies that I love work, it's that that journey, right?
Yeah.
Talk about my all-time favorite, one of my all-time favorite horror movies, Halloween.
Yeah.
What makes Halloween for me is Jamie Lee Curtis's journey, right? Yep. And when you think about some of these movies where it didn't work, I got to figure out how I'm going to phrase this. I know what I want to ask, but I don't know how I want to ask it.
Mm-hmm.
I put in front of you at the end of this podcast, Sam, I give you a whodunit movie you haven't seen.
Mm-hmm.
How far in before you figure out, God, Craig recommended a great movie? Or how far in do you go, I'm not going to watch the rest of this? How long will you go on the journey before you know, even before the movie's over, like this is the juice? Or I'm going to hit stop because I don't have time for this shit.
I mean, there's two questions here. There's one of like, literally, how long will I go? And there's another that's sort of like, how can you tell? And literally, how long will I go on like a movie that I'm really not feeling? Depends on who the recommendation came from. Sure. You know, we can hem and haw on that. Maybe I've turned off movies after 10 minutes. I've turned off movies with 20 minutes left. Yeah, Sure. Well, it depends.
What breaks at 10 minutes and what breaks at 20 minutes left?
Yeah. I think, well, usually the thing that breaks is just like, this is just too much racism for me. Like, I'm not going to do this anymore.
That's easy.
Yeah. But there is that question of like, when can you tell that you're in good hands?
Ooh, interesting.
And I think, you know, I've heard famous screenwriters say they can pick up a page and start reading and tell by the end of the first page whether this is going to be a good script or not. And I absolutely believe them. And I agree. And I think I'm one of them.
Wow.
But I don't think that that's a skill that is reserved for professionals. I think you can do that. Like, right. I think you can look at a page and read a paragraph of a book and be like, oh yeah, I'm in good hands here. Or you can read it and be like, who recommended this to me again? And like, I really feel, you know, maybe for certain things it takes a little bit to get going, but I think even the things that take a little bit to get going, you can tell whether they have the capacity to get good really quickly, whether it's going to be worth sticking on and trying. I just people are like, if the artist is talented, like they're talented at the beginning and at the end. And like, if they're not talented, they're struggling the whole time. And like, some of my favorite stuff is made by struggling artists, you know, like this really isn't like meant to be a judgmental thing, but except in the literal sense of like, I think everyone can tell pretty quickly, like how they're going to feel about a thing, even if they can't tell what's going to happen or whatever.
I'm going to blow a little smoke here, my friend. This is now, I think, the third time in the podcast where you have framed something in a way I've never thought about. I love that idea of I can tell I'm in good hands. And I think that's something that can make or break somebody as a writer, is the ability to, you just introduced to me something that I completely understood immediately. It was not a new concept to me, but you blew my mind a little bit. And that's a really neat skill, my friend.
Thank you.
And it doesn't happen to be very often. And the funny thing is do you know another person in my life who does this? My best friend, Patrick McLean, who is a professional writer. I mean, so that's a really neat gift, man, to be able to take an experience that's maybe amorphous in your audience's head and distill it down and phrase it in a way that is new, but feels like a favorite pair of jeans. That's some good shit, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. That's good. That's good. I'm going to sit now. I've got like 3 things I need to sit on and stew on. And that concept of am I in good hands is pretty damn prolific. And it's a pretty important thing, right? Because we think about this as a consumer. We think about this as an employer, right? For like, I want the people that are on my staff to have that feeling. Yeah. I am in good hands. That's really good, man.
I want to have that feeling about my place of employment.
Yeah. That's some good shit. That is some good shit.
I think it's also a good way of thinking about it in terms of why people are so inclined to go back to people they have felt in good hands of in the past. Because like, I'm really excited for the new Yorgos Lanthimos movie, Kinds of Kindness. I've not seen it yet. I don't know anything about it. It's supposed to be very disgusting. I'm pumped. But maybe I'll like it. Maybe I won't. It's 2 hours, 40 minutes long. Get it together, people. Stop making movies over 2 hours. But I'm willing to go to the theater for him because I feel like I'm in good hands with him. And yeah, I think that's how people build up careers.
Is there, and I'm not saying this to be negative, but I think I'm asking this as more insight. Is there a movie that was downgraded by the second viewing? Can you think of a movie that you saw the first time and you're like, I like this, or even just said, I think I like this, right? Because that's happened to me where I'll watch a movie and go, I think I enjoyed this. And I will watch it immediately again. If I can't form a thumbs up, thumbs down for me immediately, that means I need to watch it again, right?
Yeah.
Is there a movie that either you liked or you weren't sure about, but then you watched it a second time and you went, you know what? I don't like this movie.
That's a really tough one. Because, you can think of movies that you like, you watch them again, you like them more. I think you can think of movies where you like, give them a second shot and you still don't like them. You can do that too pretty easily. But nothing is coming to mind here.
Yeah, I tried to answer the question myself in my head, and I can't think of one either where I had that. But I think that, and this kind of ties into my question of how do you watch it? How do you watch something the second time, right?
Sure.
And maybe what it is that we have a filter that says, don't bother. Right? Stay with the one viewing and be happy there.
Yeah. The one exception I'll say, racism, sexism, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like there have definitely been movies where I like loved them as a kid. You go back as an adult and you're like,
and they don't survive.
I know better now. And even sometimes I've seen movies where it was so thrilling the first time that you kind of miss that stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And there's movies that don't hold up. And they don't hold up for the reasons you just talked about. They also don't hold up because this is going to sound pompous as hell. You're more sophisticated than you were the first time you watched it, right?
Totally.
You get why that version of me liked it, but now that I'm watching it now, it's like, it's not quite as good as I thought it was.
Yeah.
What's a joy is when you find those movies that no matter how many times you've watched it, it just gets better. Behind me is a poster of Casablanca. That's why I think it's the only perfect movie ever made. Is I have seen.
I'm not going to argue that Casablanca is not perfect. That's a perfect movie, but it's not the only one ever made.
For me.
Go on.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's because I have put this on by myself over and over again. I have forced people to sit on a couch as soon as I've never seen Casablanca comes out of their mouth. I'm like, I don't know what we thought we were going to do today, but that's not what we're doing today. Right.
Yeah. I am going to watch Casablanca tonight.
Yeah. Like that's what it is. All right. So I made my bold hot take is Casablanca for me is the only perfect movie ever made. Yeah. Who else is on that Mount Rushmore for you?
Yeah. Let's pull up my Letterboxd. The like pinnacle of perfect movies for me are Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Good choice.
And Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Ooh, why that one? That's interesting.
You ask me that and I don't know how to explain it. It's just, I cannot tell you how hard I cried at the end of that movie. I just can't, I don't know how to express it.
Yeah.
That movie conveyed a sense of melancholy and longing and still finding love and meaning and community, even in a world that doesn't want you to have those things. And then it ends that love and community and space. And that's a tragedy, but it was still beautiful to look at while it was happening.
Is there a difference between a perfect movie and a perfect movie for Sam?
No. Or no, yeah, yes, excuse me. Yes. There's no such thing as a perfect movie. Casablanca is not a perfect movie. It's a perfect movie for Craig and for Sam and for a bunch of other people, right? But like everything's subjective. Like, no, perfection does not exist, except for in the sense that like the one universe we live in is as perfect as things are going to be.
All right. You got a list in front of you, Sam. What's next?
All right. Here's another potentially perfect movie. Actually, I saw The TV Glow. I have not
seen this yet. So talk to me. This movie's so up my so in my lane, and I have not watched it yet.
Yeah, I almost don't want to because I saw it cold and I knew nothing about it, and it was a great experience. It is also, yeah. You know what? God, hold on. Give me a second.
It's okay to say, Craig, I don't want to ruin it. That's okay.
Yeah, I think I don't want to ruin it. I think I just want to say, like, that movie was incredible. That movie was a knockout. It evokes the decade I grew up in so well. It is gorgeous. The like color palette, everything's incredible. The director, I'm in good hands with that director. Everything feels intentional, but it still has that dreamlike quality of David Lynch. And throughout, there are images from that movie that I will never forget, that just reached in and made me deeply uncomfortable in a way that I will not be able to shake. It was just an incredible movie.
That's awesome. All right, that comes up to the top of my list, and I might have to bug you after I watch it so we can talk about it. What else you got? Yeah, hell yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go through some rapid fire stuff. I think I was writing a movie about two teen girls who are getting revenge on a guy. Okay. And I asked for recommendations about movies that might like fit into this wheelhouse. And someone recommended to me Kamikaze Girls. I've not seen that.
Which is this Japanese movie that was stylistically no holds barred. I love this kind of thing. You know, that like Edgar Wright thing of like, we're just going to dump it all out there onto the screen. Yeah. This movie was just trying stuff. And I loved that about it. It was just weird in the best way. And then, you know, about this like young, vibrant, odd friendship between these archetypes. I am not familiar with Japanese culture, especially not Japanese culture in 2004, I believe, when this movie was shot. But the two girls are from these archetypes that feel like they roughly correspond to like cutesy girl who's like really leaning into that and goth girl. And they sort of like both learn from each other, kind of classic. There's like a motorcycle gang involved, and like it was just a blast. It was just fun. I watched the Apple TV Plus series Constellation.
Oh, I've not watched that either.
You know that meme that's like a tweet that's like astronaut coming back from the moon. Moon's haunted. NASA astronaut. Well, NASA ground control. I'm sorry, what? Astronaut reloading pistol and getting back onto the rocket. Moon's haunted. This is like that show. It's a show based on that premise, but like thriller, horror, like very creepy. There's like an astronaut on the ISS. There's an accident. There's spookiness involved in the accident. And then she returns to Earth and her life, not how she remembered it.
Oh, I gotta watch this. This is me.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
It is 8 episodes. They resolve a lot of things, but they clearly wanted a second season and it has been canceled. So it is one of those, but like definitely worth the journey. Really interesting show about like parenthood and motherhood in particular also. Yeah.
So question for you, Sam. Something happened to me recently, and I want to know if this has ever happened to you. I watched a movie that was one of the best horror movies I've ever seen. Like, and that says a lot because of that. That's my genre. That's my favorite genre. And I'll never watch it again because it was so much.
Yeah.
That I don't want to go through it again. But I think it's a great movie. It's a I want to say it's Brazilian. It's South. And this is fucking freaking North America centric view, right? Somewhere down there, right? I can't remember. It might be Colombian. I'm not sure. It's called When Evil Lurks.
Okay.
And has that happened to you? Have you come across a movie that you loved but won't watch again?
I can remember that feeling, but I can't
remember the movie.
a particular title for it.
Gotcha.
Maybe I saw the TV glow. We'll see over time how that one sort of settles for me.
That's never happened to me before. I've never had a movie that I loved that I won't watch again. And When Evil Lurks is one of those movies.
Interesting.
All right, you got.
I'm not usually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one more. More. Game Changer. This is a game show on Dropout TV.
My God. Oh yes, yeah.
Home of Dimension 20.
Yep, I just had Ross Bryan on the show.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yep. Game Changer is a game show where every show the game is different, and the contestants don't know what the game is in advance of coming on the show.
And they barely know it. They figure it out as they play.
Yes.
Which is amazing.
It's phenomenal. I watched the whole series in like as small amount of time as I could.
Yeah.
The early seasons are good. Like right away, they're doing stuff that is like fun and has a fun little hook and premise to it. They get into the mid seasons. There are fun episodes where they're like playing particular pranks on individual people, basically, which is in the most good natured way possible. And they're just delightful. But then this most recent 6th season, just front to back, was astonishing.
So I have not watched the 6th season. What changed?
They just succeeded in maintaining the recognizable format of those early seasons while upping the production value and like just galaxy brainedness of the concepts for every episode. And I think there were a few seasons in there in the middle where they were sort of they were good games, but they were leaning less into what I think makes Game Changer special and iconic in so much itself, which is that feeling of discovery of what is the game. That is the thing that is unique about that show that no other show has. And maybe accidentally you get something like that on Taskmaster, another great show.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not the same.
No, it's not.
And I just think the 6th season, they leaned harder into that discovery than they ever have before. And it really paid off for them.
That makes me really happy to hear because I love that show. I don't love every episode of that show. There are dud episodes that I think I'm on season 4 now. There's dud episodes and they're all the same for the same reason is what is the rules of this game is not that important. And if that's not in the forefront for me, I could have laughed my ass off because the talent that they get on that show is incredible.
Incredible stuff.
But if that piece isn't there, if that's not at the center of all this, then it's just not going to be a favorite episode. So it makes me really happy to know that that's important to you and that season 6 worked.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was just amazing. That's what I've been jamming on, Craig.
Very, very cool. So guys, you all know the routine. If we scroll down right now, literally everything we've talked about is linked down below. So the movies that we talked about, the different things that we referenced, as well as, of course, the game itself. And please add the podcast to your catcher. I think you'll enjoy it as much as I do. If you enjoy my show, I think you will enjoy Sam's show. Sam, there's a lot of really cool things to do on a Tuesday night, like going and watching Challengers again.
Yeah.
But you spent an hour or two with me, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, listen, I still got dinner and the rest of my evening ahead of me. So time zone's working in our favor for once.
For those of you listening, guess what? This is the end. You listened to the whole damn episode, and I appreciate you doing that. Take care. A big thank you to Sam for joining me today. You can find out more about their work on DiceExploder.com. What is your favorite TTRPG mechanic? I'm dying to hear your thoughts. Please share your thoughts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky, or email me at admin@thirdfloorwars.com. Your voice matters, and all those links are in the show notes waiting for you. Please take a minute to rate, review, and share this podcast. Word of mouth is the key to growing Tabletop Talk. You do not want to miss the next episode. Talk with Neil Litherland about their games Sundara, Dawn of a New Age, and Army Men. Happy gaming, friend. Remember what Dorothy Parker once said, creativity is a wild mind and a disciplined eye. Go create. A TTRPG. Jesus. Got all excited there.
I'm just gonna pause here and say, like, truly, if you want to transition to that segment, like, this is the perfect setup for doing so.
Yeah, we're good. Go.
Okay, great. So, like, the thing. Let me get my brain back in place.
Mechanics are not the most important thing to you. Yep. We've all Jesus Christ, slow the fuck down, Craig. Shocker, you're really good at this.
Thank you.
That was a great segment. Great
you
segment.
You are too.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
We did miss a couple of the things I wanted to get into in Dice Exploder, but that's fine.
Well, let's see what happens organically.
Yeah,
how's that sound?
Totally.
All right, I'll bring us back.
Yeah.
You feeling okay? You got another 15 minutes?
Oh yeah. I got another hour if you want it. We'll do 15, but yeah.
Well, no, we're gonna do as long as we need to do. So
great,
we're good.
Amazing. Right. I won't cut my list short then.
Okay, I'll bring us back. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over, and you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers. Well, I mean, if you're here, you might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast too while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.